Last week, Vladimir Putin visited India and was received with the highest honors. What does this tell us about these two countries and the emerging BRICS states? Here to discuss with me is the Indian scholar and Russia expert, Professor Anuradha Chenoy. Anu, welcome back.
Hello, glad to be with you again, Pascal.
Glad to have you on again. You have been looking at Indian-Russian relations for many years. Can you tell me first, what did you make out of this state visit? Was there something that surprised you, or did it go as expected?
Well, look, I think there were several levels to this visit. There were bilateral, there were regional implications, there were political, strategic, economic, defense, and symbolic, geopolitically. A lot of signals were being sent. What a lot of the press and others expected, some big ticket announcements which weren't there. But I believe that this was part of a long historical, political, and economic process, a very holistic process. And I think that's what we can discuss, how it was a process and what was behind it. Because many things happened just before are going to happen, which were not announced. So it was, there were a lot of signals and symbols, the geopolitical context, the fact that this was a celebration of 25 years of signing the strategic relationship document between the two 25 years ago. And the fact that I think it's clear to the Indians that Russia is winning this war, and that India has, they said they were neutral, but they've kind of supported it throughout. They've both bailed each other out. In a sense, it's called mutual benefit in the last 3 years, where India got Russian oil at very substantial discounted rates, which, as even the foreign minister said, powered the Indian economy. And on the other hand, they helped hold together the Russian economy at a very difficult time of overall sanctions.
Yeah, and that's the accusation of the West, right? China and India helped Russia by not joining the sanctions, which is though a very weird argument, because why would a proxy war of the West, actually then oblige India and China to change their relationship with Russia? This, by the way, always a problem of neutral states. They're always being told that if you don't help us, then your refusal to help is support for the other side. It's a very, very classical thing to happen. But India stood its ground and stood very firm, right? Also toward pressure from the United States, which really about a month 6-7 weeks ago tried to crack down hard on India, of saying like, you have to stop buying oil. And India said like, no. Just no, go sanction us more. We're not going to stop. And the Americans back down. They didn't actually come down with these sanctions.
Well, there are 25% additional sanctions on India. Besides the 25% tariffs, these are unilateral economic measures. They put another 25% for several months. So India has to pay, is suffering from 50% tariffs, which is very high on Indian exports. And a large section of Indian exports, because Indian exports to the US are of quite a large amount, almost 100 billion. So things like the auto parts industry, the jewels and gems industry, they're almost going under, but the government has tried to subsidize them and find new channels. So what's happened, for example, things like the seafood industry, they have found new new avenues, including to Japan or even Russia, which has just given 25 marine industry licenses for shrimp imports.
Yeah.
So the US is also going to suffer because if you make new channels and value chains, then these are long-term. And even if they reduce tariffs in a while, India would have diversified. So, and the other point you were making about, pressure, I think the West always has this with us or against us,
Mhm.
whereas the rest of the world has a multipolar vision that we are not against you, but we have an independent foreign policy. We have a question of choice. This is strategic autonomy. And we are not against you in any way, but leave us be on other things. We can have relationships with multiple partners. We can have trilateral, bipolar, whatever, but we're not with this kind of, very bipolar or tripolar international system. And that's what the multipolarity is about. That is what the new geopolitics is about. And they have given a lot of arguments, the Indians as well as the Russians. Well, look, even Putin at this time said that the US is buying nuclear fuel. So why are they clamping down on India for oil? Because what they want, there are no sanctions on. There's no sanctions on nuclear fuel. Europe is in many ways taking oil, which originates from Russia. They might be taking it from Azerbaijan or Turkey or India, etc., but they are buying it ultimately. So India has presented this kind of logic, and they've also said we are also increased the sales of oil from the US. We've ordered weapons from the US because the US does have a system of kind of tributes. You have to.
Yeah, I never thought about it in these terms, but yeah, the tributary system of like, okay, I'm offering you my money, you give me back a little bit of weapons, and therefore we buddy buddy. Yeah, that's true. um, but what then surprised me was, so the state visit had been planned obviously for a long time, right? These things don't happen overnight. Only Donald Trump comes up with the idea to kind of
Yeah.
meet Putin next week. Other normal countries plan this at least a year ahead, right? And it's different ministries involved and protocol and so on. What surprised me was that it was done with so much fanfare. Like the official Twitter account of Narendra Modi actually tweeted about it on almost every a 1 minute basis with a lot of pictures and beautifully made graphics and videos. Very, very proud, So in a sense, the opposite of what the United States would like to see, right? And what Europe wants to see. If something happens at all, then maybe somewhere in a back room. But India made a point out of demonstrating this relationship, didn't it?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that this is a historic relationship without any ups and downs. It's just been smooth. What they say, one of the very old traditional analysts had said that Russia's relations with Asia is like the moon. It waxes and wanes, but it's always there.
Mm.
So that's how it has been. Sometimes it's a bit muted, but with India, it's always been very strong and it's across the political spectrum. So there's no criticism of it, even from any opposition party. Domestically, there is a confidence in Russia at all levels, from the strategic levels to strategic community to local people. They feel, Russia is going to be there for them because they've been there supporting Indian industrialization, the Indian public sector, exchange of students, scientists. Every astronaut in the Indian space program has been trained there. So it's at a very deep level and at a very sectoral level. So domestically, it was good for Mr. Modi to showcase this. Internationally, he wanted to emphasize on strategic autonomy, that Russia is a partner. And yes, we would like a strategic relations with the US, which we've tried for the last 20 years. But the US in the last, Mr. Trump has kind of humiliated Mr. Modi and India in several ways in the last few months. One, by continuously arguing that they're the ones who mediated between India and Pakistan. And that's a very strong stand of India continuously in their foreign policy that they will not have any third-party intervention in their disputes. They would resolve it themselves, especially with Pakistan on the issue of the line of actual control. With China, they would do it themselves. They have the capacity. They've been doing it. So, and Mr. Trump has gone, he said it about 30 times, showing that the Indian foreign policy regime is a liar. If you go on saying that I have resolved it, and it's there in the new national security strategy, amongst the first or second paragraph itself of the, because it says these are the conflicts that we have resolved. It says India and Pakistan. So that irks India. That's one. Then these unilateral economic pressures of tariffs, 25% fine for taking oil from Russia. They've, no regular meeting, pressure on India on all kinds of things, on buying weapons, etc. So India's given a message saying that we are not going to shift our old traditional strategic relations on account of European or American pressure. So that is why this very grand, very high profile visit, in fact, the Russians wanted it as an official visit, but India upgraded it as a state visit. And that is why the Prime Minister was at the tarmac, which normally he isn't there. The foreign minister or some other set of ministers go. But he was standing there. So right from the airport to the luncheon at his house, and also the Russians came with a large delegation. Their defense minister Borisov came, and a large business delegation. So there was a one-to-one meeting with the business community in India, which both Mr. Putin and the Prime Minister of India addressed. And there was discussion. If you see the document which came out, the Declaration of Agreement, they didn't call it a memorandum. It was kind of a declaration of agreement. It has about 23 different aspects to it, and it touches upon a large number of things. Now, the reason I said that it is a process is two or three things that I think we need to touch upon. One is just 2 days before the Putin visit, the Russian Duma ratified an agreement which has been ongoing for almost a year. It was first signed in February, and it's called the Reciprocal Exchange of Logistics Agreement, RELOS, ratified just on 2nd December, where both militaries can access each other's ports, airports, and for logistics, drills, disaster relief. And so this provides the Indian Navy Air Force access to the Russian northern ports and the Arctic, and it provides access to Russian shipping in the Indian Ocean region, where the Indian Navy is present. Of course, they had signed a similar agreement in 2016 with the US called the Logistics Exchange Memorandum Agreement, 2016. But this is much deeper because the kind of access it provides to the military.
So just to clarify, this is not just for commercial ships. This is military port access. No stationing, I suppose, but access. Huh?
Access means they can come for repairs, or so that would mean temporary, but it's not a full station. They cannot just hang on there. But they can come in case they need some spare part or there's some emergency. So they don't have to do it immediately. This is long term. They can. Otherwise, it's difficult to access the Indian ports. But this makes it easier. It has to be put in place, but it's not giving them a base or anything at all.
Right.
It's just that each other, the logistics, there'll be logistic support for each other's shipping, especially. So that's one. Then there has been in process an attempt to sign a free trade agreement, not just with Russia, but with the Eurasian Economic Union, which means with the 5 countries. So that'll be Russia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan. And just a month ago, our foreign minister said that the framework has been is readied, and the details are being ironed out. And the talks between Modi and Putin said that they would like to expedite it. So they didn't sign it, but the process is in place. And you've got to remember, for example, the India-EU agreement has not yet been signed, and it's taken a good 11 or 12 years because they cannot agree on non-tariff and tariff barriers or on import of dairy. But this, within a year, they expect it to be signed. But within that, there were several smaller agreements. For example, the Russian and Indian railways signed a US $5 billion contract to build high-speed trains, and there was not this time, but just a few days. All this has been just happening along, so that it doesn't come as a big a kind of blast to the West, which is very nervous and they see Russia as a threat. They have also had an agreement to build commercial shipping in India. India is going to build a pharmaceutical factory in Kaluga in Russia. So these small things, but I think they all add up to a significant kind of things. And the other thing is that what this particular talks did was that they made a roadmap and a goalpost of increasing Russian-Indian trade, which is currently about $69 billion, to $100 billion by 2030, because the trade is still a weak point. India's trade with China is higher, and Indian trade with Russia is a bit lopsided, uneven, because a lot of it is either oil and petroleum products, fertilizer, coal, and defense. So, but commercial trade is still quite limited. The Russian market has been, as I've seen, pretty overtaken by the Chinese market.
Yeah.
Chinese
And
cars.
sorry, just to jump in, I would suppose that India has a trade deficit probably with Russia, right? Because these oil and so on is like very expensive and a lot, and what India exports to Russia is probably not as much as China can export. So you would want to get more even on this part, I suppose.
Absolutely, Pascal. This is a very important point, because India's exports are just 4-point-something billion. That's just about slightly less than 5 billion, and they want to increase it. So what has happened as a consequence is that Russia has accumulated a huge amount of Indian rupees.
Right.
Because Mr. Putin also said that 96% of this trade is in national currencies. That's huge. So they have a huge amount of rupees. So what has happened to address this? Because this has been of great concern to India also.
Sorry, one question. Does that mean that Russia sells its oil to India in rupees? It accepts rupees for its oil?
Well, you see, there's a history to that. Yes, they do.
Wow.
Or with dirhams through UAE. But since there are sanctions and Russia has been kept out of SWIFT, the financial messaging system, they cannot accept dollars, and it's of no use to them. So they have to take rupees. And earlier, during the Soviet period, there was a Rupee-Ruble trade agreement. So for years, India was having a Rupee-Ruble exchange, but that collapsed when the Soviet Union disintegrated, and then India was left holding rubles, and the ruble value was declining. So they came to an agreement of how they pegged the ruble through the dollar. But now it's Russia. But there is a very interesting and a very important methodology how Russia is going to use these rupees, because, and this is very key, I think, the Reserve Bank of India has a system called the Vostro system, where a foreign bank can open an account in India. They get a license, and they can, therefore, they can do trade in national currencies. Now, recently, as recent as I think it was August 12, 2025, the Reserve Bank of India altered some rules for the Russians, which enables Russian entities, companies, banks, to reinvest their surplus rupees into Indian government bonds, treasuries, and equities. So you can see the advantage. First, there is this trade in rupees. Russia holds a large amount of rupees, and then they don't know what to do with the rupees, because it's not such an important, it's not an international currency like the dollar or the euro. So they reinvest it in Indian infrastructure, in Indian government bonds, in Indian treasury, and even equities. Now, this has just come about from August 12, 2025. So it will take time, but the Russian central bank has opened its office in Mumbai. The Square Bank has several offices. And this time they said, maybe, I don't know if within the meeting or before that they're going to invest $100 million, equivalent to $100 million in the Indian market and treasury, etc., in the next 3 years. So you can see there's a circular, almost a loop of exchange.
But this is perfect. This is what it has to be. I mean, money only works if you have a loop. So the point with the reserve currency, the US dollar, is that everybody wants it. Therefore, you can exchange it for so many things. But if you do bilateral trade agreements, you need a bilateral mechanism in order for these currencies to flow back in one way or another, or be exchangeable to others. So we are seeing here the beginning of how two very large nations are trying to figure out how to close the circle again, right? Without then the rupee sitting out there, which now means that technically the Indian government can now borrow Indian rupees from Russian entities, which is a useful thing to do, right?
You can see how it links to BRICS.
Yep.
Now all the BRICS countries, they do not want de-dollarization for sure. The dollar is very important for them, their economies also. So this whole threat perception that the West has, that there's going to be de-dollarization, is not. A multipolar world needs a multipolar economy and banking and financial system. And so they just want to do, this kind of bilateral trade in their national currencies. And I think that was part of the agreement, where both parties agreed that, that the system of bilateral trading should be made smoother, and that it was one agreement which was signed. It wasn't specific, but it said that both countries are interested in smoothening this system and developing local currency exchange through trade, and developing a financial messaging system which would work between Russia and India. They both have their own. Russia has its own messaging system and India has its own. But to somehow link these and also look at digital currencies, which is all part of the BRICS framework also. So this was put as a bilateral framework, economic framework also.
This is fascinating because it interlinks so much, right? It shows very, very well how this is basically a bilateral issue, but with a lot of multilateral implications. Now, let me ask you this. Usually when two great powers or large powers, if they get closer and closer, usually there's a third party that gets more nervous. Now, we do have the United States and Europe that are already very nervous, but what about China? It's the third very important party in this equation. So, do you think the Russians and the Indians try to include Russia in a way that it doesn't feel left out, or what? Anything behind the scenes going on there?
Well, look, Russian policy is very clear about Greater Eurasia. And Greater Eurasia is China, India, and the South, and the ASEAN and Northeast Asian countries. So their Russian relationship with Europe are on a steep decline. So they're really, culturally, they're Europeans, but politically and economically, they're turning towards this, what they call Greater Eurasia, of which they are a part. And, half of Russia, after all, does come into Asia, right to the Pacific, geographically. And they have very close strategic relations with China. That's well known and talked about internationally. And Russia is the one very interested in a Russia, India, China tripolar kind of forum and closer relations. This is not new. This started, interestingly, in about 1993, 94. Number one, I think the Communist Party of China, CPC, in 1992, had a small resolution about the importance of a Russia-India-China relationship. But the relations of India and China are very uneven, especially in the since till 2020. Those years between 2015, 16, especially 2018 to 2020, when you had these skirmishes on the border, because we have a kind of a frozen line, and there is no agreement on where the India-China border actually is. So there is a border issue. And China believes one part of the Indian Himalayan state of Arunachal is actually South Tibet. So they have sensitivities on this. And the Russians also, it was the Primakov doctrine saying that there should be a RIC, which later became BRICS. And Russia has been trying to push for better Sino-Indian relationship, which has not happened, but they leave it alone because they don't intervene in India's foreign policy decisions. But they do talk about it in their discourse, that it would be good, India and China would both benefit. But India and China don't see fully eye to eye on all issues. Of course, India-China trade is at a great high, more than Indian-Russian trade. So there are economic relations, and a lot of precursor goods that India makes, the precursor comes from China. Like, for example, in antibiotics. Now, India is supposed to be the pharmaceutical center for the world. The kind of exports it does are into billions of dollars, but some component also comes from China. Similarly with, let's say, auto parts and others, they do have some components, and then they remake it with a knockdown kind of technology and remake it here. So there is a dependency. But China wants there to be greater economic relations, and that is their policy. They focus on that. Whereas India wants a sorting out of the border. And the last meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Tianjin in August, I think you talked about it in one of your videos, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, in which Xi, Modi, and Mr. Putin met, was a high-profile meeting again, just in August, where both Xi Jinping and Modi agreed, and there were several meetings where the Chinese foreign minister first came to India, the working and coordination mechanism between India and China, and that's a very good thing, that there is a working group and a coordination mechanism on the border, which meets, and it had its 23rd meeting just before the Shanghai Cooperation meeting, in which the two leaders actually set forth a paradigm saying that differences should not become conflicts, that there should basically be conflict management in a very clear terms of conflict management. And there are various proposals because there are 50,000 troops of India and China on that border. They have not fully de-escalated, though at points there has been some de-escalation, which is what the foreign minister had told the Indian parliament some time back.
And if I remember, sorry, just to interject, if I remember correctly, then both sides have taken certain steps to de-risk the border, right? I'm not sure if this is right, but I've heard that there's a policy of not carrying weapons. So there were instances when these troops actually threw stones at each other, but they actually didn't use their weapons.
That's true.
It's true, right? There are certain such protocols on both sides.
Yeah, because there were 4 or 5 clashes. One was a serious one where some Indian soldiers were killed in Galwan, but there were others where they were just using sticks and stones. But even that leads to a kind of a nationalist sentiment and a break in confidence, especially among, if there is an Indian nationalism, and we do have a very kind of almost a xenophobic nationalist government. And it filters down at all levels, and there is a lack of trust. So it's not easy to have a Russia, India, China kind of triangle because they also compete with each other in the region. So there are issues, but Russia is keen on actually building better relations, hoping that there are better Russia-India-China relations. But this was not part of the talks. Right. It was purely bilateral.
So Russia is not trying to inject itself into the China-India relationship like the United States is trying to inject itself everywhere, right? So it's hands off, but let's in a perfect world we would all be friends.
That's right.
Maybe one more question, is there any, because Russia has been building these bilateral relationships over the last couple of years, while also building on multilateral fora. But one of the interesting ones is that it also builds a relationship now with North Korea, right? In various ways, militarily one, but also economically they have plans. In the India-Russia, in this process that you outlined, did North Korea ever figure in any way?
No, because I think India and Russia both respect each other's boundaries in the sense of their autonomy to do make their own foreign policy choices. And I don't think they discuss this at all. But there are two other important things. One was a skilled labor mobility agreement, which will take Indian labor to Russia. Russia is deeply short of skilled labor.
Yeah, the United States just made it much harder for skilled Indian labor to come to the United States, so why not?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the ongoing defense agreements, because in the India-Pakistan, 4-day conflict, the Indian military felt that the S-400s were very effective, as were the Sukhoi planes, which India imports. And there's going to be joint production in a number of military defense sector. So you can see, and then of course the science and technology and exchange of students and culture and films. So at every level, whether it was economy, defense, politics, BRICS, SCO, um, everything, a lot of things were touched in this.
Right. And maybe let's touch a little bit on how the United States kind of influences this. On the one hand, there were the tariffs. On the one hand, there's the relentless pressure. But now we also have this new national security strategy document that came out last week, and I haven't made a video about it yet, but I'm still studying it. How did that was that discussed in India? Did it have an impact on the way India also sees sees how the US is trying to maneuver, and does it impact the relationship with Russia?
In a sense that what's happened in the last few months is, I believe, in my view, is that the US under Trump has a different strategy towards India apropos the Biden and earlier administrations, who really sought to bring India as a strategic partner to curb China.
Mm-hmm.
And in that process, they would put pressure on India. And in fact, one of the deputy national security advisors or deputy national security of the US came to India and said, look, if China attacks India, Russia will not support you. So, you should have better strategic relations with us. So this came out in the Indian press. You can see that they were trying to pull India away from Russia, but it never worked. And now I think they seem to have given up. For a long time, the US felt that Pakistan was a better strategic partner. The US felt that Pakistan was a better strategic partner. And they had very close relations with the Pakistan military, which was, and Pakistan had been part of CENTO, the Central Treaty Organization, and other US military pacts, and they were very useful. But after 9/11 and the fact that Pakistan had shielded Osama bin Laden, the US relations with the Pakistan military, which is a Pakistan state in many ways, because in India they say, that Pakistan has a military, the Pakistan military has a state, rather than vice versa. But in any case, but this was muted and their relation with India increased. And India always said this relationship should not be hyphenated. So they tried to dehyphenate it. But again, this hyphenation has begun. You could see that Asim Munir, the chief of staff of Pakistan, has had two meetings, very important meetings with the US president, and they are being used because Pakistan strategically is very important for the US in terms of Iran, Central Asia, and the Middle East, and the Islamic countries of West Asia.
But on that front, the United States is kind of losing Pakistan, isn't it? Because like in the Israel, in the 12-day war, Pakistan even went as far as to say like, no, we would help defend Iran. At least they made such statements.
Well, look, I think Pakistan has very interesting geopolitics because they can balance all these countries, and these countries, they know these countries also need them because strategically they are, they have a border with Iran, and they've had problems with Iran also. There were, even bombing of each other, and they have good relations. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. They keep shifting. So their military is quite flexible in that way. They have close relations, very close relations with China. And I don't think the US can disturb that. But nonetheless, the US feels they can use the Pakistan military strategically, which they did earlier. Then there was a low, and now it appears that this is going to increase again, especially because now the American ambassador to India, Mr. Gore, who is very close to the Trump family, he is not just ambassador to India, but he is Mr. Trump's special envoy to South and Central Asia.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, which means India has been strategically downgraded to some extent that you don't have just an ambassador to India. It's linked to that region. And there are several other instances where it seems that, for example, the Quad meeting has not been held, which was it has been postponed. But in this national security strategy document, in the 33 pages, I saw that India has been mentioned about largely twice, but in two, three other places. So overall, 4 times. And one is, of course, that how the Americans and Mr. Trump has resolved the Pakistan-India conflict. First time. Second, that India is an important partner for the Indo-Pacific.
Mm.
So specifically, they would like to use India as a partner in the Indo-Pacific, again, as a possible containment for China, which is something India does not like. They would like to be a partner in the Indo-Pacific for logistics, for maritime lanes, but they don't want to be seen as in any US-China conflict, because they would like to maintain their neutrality.
And the United States has a problem there because the US would love to use India in the maritime theater against China, but India's problems with China, its border issues, are not in the sea. They're on land. It's a land issue. It's not a maritime issue. Maritime, I think the trade links between the two are something that both sides cherish. So the United States is, yeah, it's a tough sell, isn't it? But
it's a tough sell. It's, because India wants to have good relations with the US. And when I went to China recently, the discourse there is continuously that US is a hegemon, they're a bully, and we need multipolarity. We're not against them, they're against us. And even some of the companies, I saw 1 or 2 of their companies, the companies individually were also sanctioned, their biotechnology, etc. But India doesn't continuously go on about US being a hegemon or a bully. They try to negotiate, and there's a very pro-American, sympathetic to America
right.
strategic community. But at the same time, they do not want their relations with Russia to be disturbed, and they want this autonomy and not be part of any conflict theater, as you call it.
Yeah, so in a sense, the national security strategy paper actually outlines, of course, that the main goal is, the good thing is, I think the main goal is not to fight a war with China, but to keep any competitor from reaching the US goal. I mean, in the US imagination, the US is the top dog, right? And has primacy, and you need to make sure that that's maintained. And then the goal is to make sure everybody else stays below. But in this sense, like the India cannot be probably used the way that in the Indo-Pacific, or just in the larger Pacific, like in the maritime theater that they would like to. So do you think that this is also that the strategic community in India actually understands that this is probably one of the approaches of the Americans vis-a-vis India?
They definitely understand it, but at the same time, if they want a better relationship with the US, they might have to give something that they may not want. And this is one aspect, that if you want a better relationship with India, then this Quad needs to work. And the Quad is something which can be quite dangerous.
Yeah. But the Quad is already in place for like 10 years or more. And isn't it part of, like you used at the beginning, this word, the tributary system? Isn't it part of kind of, okay, we are showcasing to you that we give money and we buy stuff from you so that you remain happy? So is it that?
2 things. One, the Quad came up, when there was that huge tsunami,
right,
which affected Japan, Southeast Asia, and the Indian coast.
That was
And so many
2007.
people were
Yeah.
killed.
Yeah.
It was such a huge international disaster in this part of the world. And at that time, the Indian Navy, they did assist a lot of ships and others, but they were doing it on their own. And they realized they needed some link with some other navies in the region. And immediately the Americans jumped in and offered Quad as a disaster relief, plus humanitarian, plus maritime security. And of course, the Americans don't do anything without thinking long time about China, and India also doesn't have that great relations with China, so they did join it because they're constantly trying to improve relations and be a strategic partner to the US. But for India to one, have strategic autonomy and then be a partner to the US is a fine balance, and not easy. So they have to continuously calibrate their relations with others and with the US and with Russia on these lines. But you can see all the countries are talking to the US. The Chinese also want better relations with the US. The Russians want better relations with the US. So it's not India alone, but they want it on equal terms, not just on US terms. Whereas the US pushes for greater advantage because they don't see others as equal. It is, Lance Taylor's, that famous hubs and spokes kind of primacy, as we call it, that they are in the center and the others are spokes of different lengths, like a bicycle wheel. They see it that way, whereas we would like a mutually beneficial, equal relationship. But for US, it's primacy and the others are subsidiaries.
Yeah, but I think over the long run, I mean, this strategy will probably work out better because we're also seeing, like with Europe, a prime example of how how an ally is treated who jumps over every single stick that the Americans put, like every single one, and all you get in return is is actually kind of mistreatment, right? They look down on you and then tell you do need to do even more and more and more, and the more you do, the more they look down on you. So probably this is actually now. I would say it's probably a strategy that will work out, but it's one that does come with ups and downs. So do you currently see the US-India relationship actually rather improving, or are these 25% like additional tariffs weighing very, very heavily? And the insults also to Mr. Modi.
Well, look, India is trying very hard. These negotiations on trade are ongoing since months. They haven't worked out, but they say they are at a sensitive stage where they could work out, and these 25% additional tariffs could be removed, and things would be back to normal. But it's clear that they'll never be back to normal like they were. That trust factor has decreased, and India has to continuously watch out for Americans. They're watching how they are behaving with Russia. The fact that Mr. Trump offered China G2, it's a good thing China rejected it.
Sorry, what is G2?
When Mr. Trump met Xi he said that they can have a G2 instead of a G7, where both of them can, be primary, have Russia, the US will acknowledge China's spheres of influence in Northeast and Southeast Asia. But Xi Jinping said that we will never be a hegemon. This was a conversation which we saw.
I didn't even hear about that. Thank you.
Yeah, do look it up. And so I think India was watching that sometimes Mr. Trump is inviting Pakistan and not speaking to Mr. Modi, or he is wooing Xi Jinping and ignoring India and putting tariffs and putting pressure. So all these things are part of the calculus. At the same time, I think India is being very patient because India has high stakes with the US, $100 billion of trade, a lot of Indian non-resident Indians, so they have this long-distance nationalism from America.
Mm.
They sometimes intervene in Indian politics, but they're a lobby over there. The Indian students want to go to American universities. In fact, someone in America, I heard them say that this Make America Great Again, a lot of it was an Indian technology hand. These young students who go there, Silicon Valley is full of them who have helped American AI. They haven't done it in India, but they've done it there because of the kind of facilities and salaries they get. So from all these Indian institutes of technologies, which are of world standard, first there were 5, now there are like 10 or 15. Their aim is always to go to the US. So there is a great urge to go for further studies. The Chinese, interestingly, many of them come back, but Indians want to stay on for that green card. And
Yeah.
that is being controlled. So there is there is an interest in the US. Their soft power is very strong because India, the elite speaks English. I myself love American films and American music and literature. But of course, people read a lot of it. So there is a big market for American soft power and a sympathy also for America. But there is now beginning to be an understanding of what the Americans can do. That is, they are liberal inside, but outside, their national interest can collide with anyone. And then and Europe is a prime example. And I think everyone's feeling sorry sorry for the Europeans.
Thank you, by the way, for saying that, because the Europeans, of course, haven't understood that yet. I mean, it will take them another 20 years, but it's very kind of the others to feel sorry for us. Maybe just to round it up, like the way that you're seeing the now India's long-term strategy. Do you think it will invest more into bilateral relationships, more into multilateral relationships, or where is the anchor point of India's foreign policy strategy toward the global south, including Russia, of course, like the BRICS and so on?
Well, look, India always says that they are part of the leadership of the global south. The global south doesn't have one leader. Currently, I think South Africa is being a good leader by having gone to the International Court of Justice on the issue of Gaza. But India is also part of the G77, the group of 77 who coordinate in the United Nations on various issues. They are part of the non-aligned movement. Still, it's become more transactional, but still they go for the meetings and they're part of it. They're part of BRICS, SCO, they're part of IPSA, the India, Brazil, South Africa, and many plurilateral forum. The Indian Ocean Region Forum, BIMSTEC, they want to have closer relations with ASEAN, with Japan. So that's their policy, what they call the multi-vector policy. In some quarters, there's criticism of that because they're saying, it's neither here nor there, and it's lost its normative and moral edge which was there during the non-aligned movement of being anti-racist and anti-colonial and anti-neocolonial. Now it's much more transactional and therefore beneficial for Indian neoliberal capitalism and growth because they're engaging with so many countries, but they're also doing development assistance, unconditional development assistance for a lot of countries in Africa and Latin America, humanitarian assistance, etc. And that's different than Western assistance because it has no conditions. And the country which wants assistance lays down the terms and what they want it for. So India doesn't say that you have to, for example, channel the assistance we give in a particular direction or doesn't have social clauses or environmental clauses, which could be good or bad. They just give the assistance. So there is that aspect towards the global south. Next year, India is going to be, in 2026, the chair of the BRICS. And Russia has promised full support, and that was part of this agreement that Russia would support it, which means that Mr. Putin could come. If not, of course, Lavrov would be there. The two foreign ministers, Lavrov and Mr. Jaishankar, are quite even personally close. And India respects what Russia does. Interestingly, for example, 2014, when Russia took over Crimea, India was one country which said they have legitimate interests. Even China opposed that, but India supported. So, it's not a new relationship, and and this meeting shows it's only going to get much deeper at multiple levels. And if their economy is integrative, if this works out, the free trade agreement and Russian investments in the Indian economy, it would be pretty big in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I think
Even
so.
deeper than it was. Yeah.
I think so. And also, like the mechanisms that you laid out earlier, I mean, there's a lot in this process that has very high potential, which is, I believe, one of the reasons why people are quite optimistic about BRICS, India, China, Russia, because they're creating new things and not just talking about all the stuff they want to destroy, which I'm very happy about. Now, Anu, thank you for the very broad overview. People who want to read more from you, where should they find you?
Well, I kind of write in this Indian journal called Economic and Political Weekly very regularly on a lot of issues of geopolitics. And if you just Google my name, because I don't write a blog or anything, because I also teach full time, and at the Jindal University now. So I write in different Indian journals, and that's where, if you just Google my name, a large number of articles just appear. But otherwise, anyone can email me, and I would send them what I'm writing.
Everybody, look up Anuradha Chenoy and get in touch with her if you like. Anuradha, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Pascal.